Good evening. Thank you guys for being here tonight. I'm Carrie Watkins, the race director, and Lynn Porter, our operations manager, is here. And really all of our team is here who make this work. If you're part of the team, wave your hand, because they're part of the magic that makes this race work. Thank you guys for being here, and you're in for a treat tonight. But if you will join me for a moment of silence, we're on our quest for 168 days, and tonight we honor Catherine Ridley, who was in the Job Corps that day, single mom with 2 kids, and every day we honor one of the 168, or we remember, we honor the survivors, and we thank the rescue team. So if you'll join me for a quick moment of silence. Thank you very much. In 2013, many of you remember what happened in Boston as the race was wrapping up that day, and we were just a few days away from the anniversary here, the April 19th anniversary, and I'm pretty sure Marianne and I were about to do a media tour of the site in the church, which is our backup on April 19th if we need it, and we literally watched kind of the day unfold and how our day changed. And then really how the race changed, because we put the call out if people wanted to come and run or finish the race here, they could. And then this red sock thing happened, and everybody showed up in red socks that year. And it was a bond that formed that I don't think we necessarily, no one wanted it, but sometimes when bad things happen, you've got to figure out how to make the best of it. And tonight you're going to hear from Tom Grilk, who is recently retired, but I don't really think he's retired because he's traveling a lot, and people are picking his brain for all that he's created. But started at the Boston Marathon, became the president and CEO. Was an announcer for 20 years or so. 35 years. There you go. See, I'm not a mathematician, so I have Sarah here. And so, anyway, great guy. His wife Nancy's here in the back, and former history teacher. So they've been in the museum the last couple of days, and Tom spoke to our volunteers, chairs, and coordinators this morning, today at lunch. And tonight, really, we just wanted to put it out to the runners. Many of you are running or have run Boston or trying to get to Boston. And we wanted to give you a chance to really hear from the mastermind of what makes that race so special. It is one of a kind. If you haven't been there, you're in for a treat. If you have, you know what we're talking about. But please help me give a big Oklahoma welcome to Tom Grilk.
Carrie, thank you. Good evening. It is a great pleasure to be with all of you. There is a heritage that our 2 events, our 2 cities share. It's not one anybody wanted, as Carrie said, and I thought it was just me. For each of us, we have a heritage of celebrating joy in a marathon, for sure, but at the same time, remembering and displaying the resilience required in the face of tragedy. And for us in Boston, we learned from all of you. It happened here first. It happened here on a far greater, unimaginable scale than anything that happened to us. But we remembered what happened here. We looked to you. Our preparations for everything were changed because of what we learned here. And it does form a sort of a bond. And if you look at the Boston Marathon and the marathon here, a run to remember for sure, there's something special about both, born of tragedy, that is shared by almost no other event. So if you look across the world of marathoning, these 2 events are very, very close. We have the run in Boston, a lot of people have to qualify for, we'll talk about that. The run here, that is so special because of something shared here that people first worked through, showed that resilience that was necessary to help a city survive even in the face of unimaginable tragedy, and then go on to put on a race that's fun. And by the way, if you're going to do that and you're going to have an event that goes on year after year after year, and necessarily evolves if you don't have the gift, as I did, of having about 100 years of history beforehand when you walk in to build on. Somebody's got to drive that. Somebody's got to build it, make it happen, make it change from year to year, from decade to decade, so that it continues to be just as special as it always was and will continue to be. And for that, you get Kerry Watkins. Good for you. So let's, earlier today, as Kerry said, I had the great good fortune of speaking to volunteers, people who work on this, people without whom, as all of you well know, are the ones who make it work. If there are no volunteers, there is no event. We see it in Boston, you see it here. There are a few of you who were here before. There'll be a little redundancy here, I beg your pardon, but what I wanted to address more this evening, for those of you who are headed off to run in Boston this year, particularly if it's the first time, talk a little bit about what you will feel when you're there. A little bit about what you'll do, but a little bit about what you'll feel. How many people here have run Boston before? Well, first of all, thank you. If we have no runners, we have no race, and to have people come do it is very nice indeed. And how many are going this year? Good. First timers? I'm talking to you. But it helps put in, I'll talk about what it's like to be there as a runner, but all within the context of what it is that our two events and our two cities share. Now, Boston Marathon, if you've been there, that's the start. It's become a fairly immodest, large event. There are about 31,000 people that come out to run. We need about 400 buses to get them all out to the start in 4 different waves. There are 9,500 volunteers, about 1,800 medical volunteers, 4,000 public safety people, a whole lot of tongue depressors. The list of things is very long, but it becomes complicated. But it also is very rewarding. People come and they raise about $40 million a year for charities around Boston, and the Boston community benefits to the tune of about $200 million a year in economic benefit. So it's large, but you have evolved far faster than we ever did as you come along here, so I might imagine the same thing. Now, for runners, for those who are running, or people you might know who are running, even if you haven't done it, this is the start. It is the itty-bittiest, teeniest start area for any major marathon in the world. It is the town of Hopkinton, Massachusetts, which is larger than this room, but not by much. So you got to come out there in 4 waves on buses to get there. You get to the starting line, and when you start off, you go down. There's a net loss in the Boston Marathon of 490 feet from start to finish, which sounds encouraging, but it isn't. It's awful. And the worst thing you can do is go quickly down that first mile, and the temptation is enormous, particularly if you're caught up with people who might be faster than you are. It's exciting, you're thrilling, you've been standing around for a long time, you want to get going, you want to move, and you do, and boy, do you pay a price later. So you take it easy going down that first mile. Run with people slower than you are. You'll beat them all later. You'll have a much better time. But what people are really running, in a way, for emotionally, is to get to the finish. When as runners you come up Hereford Street and take that last left turn onto Boylston Street, you've got about 640 yards to get to the finish, all the way to that beacon, the finish line structure far away. There are thousands and thousands and thousands of people there who have come for one reason. That's to cheer for you. So the biggest piece of advice I can give anybody who's running the Boston Marathon, unless you think you're going to win, is save energy for the finish. Enjoy it, savor it. It is memorable in a way that no other place is. Of the other World Marathon majors, the other 5, New York, Chicago, Berlin, Tokyo, I left out somebody. Yeah. Our great partners, Nancy and I were over there at a global terrorism conference in London in the fall, talking about what do you do if your event gets attacked. But all of those races look just the way an urban race should look. They start in a city. You run through city streets. It just feels like it. New York, you go through all these different ethnic neighborhoods. It is splendid. In Berlin, you go past history all over the place. In London, all of that. But then they finish in a park. And the noise and the crowd just kind of dissipates up into the sky. In Boston, you start out in this rural community, and you run through 7 cities and towns with increasing numbers of people that are out there to cheer for you. There are a lot of people, but you're not in a city until you get pretty much to the end. And then you get into this throbbing urban canyon of people who are making an immense amount of noise. Savor it. Save enough energy to enjoy that. If nothing else, do that. They're probably not going to run your fastest time ever, but who cares? You did it. So we had some advantage in Boston in that we have a little history on our side. The race goes back to 1897. It was born really in 1896 when the Olympic Games were revived, and the Boston Athletic Association sent the majority of Team USA over to Athens to run the race, or to be in the Olympics, bring home the majority of gold medals. And they came back home and said, you know what, we ought to have a marathon. And so the Boston Marathon got started with 15 starters, 12 finishers. The most important guy out there had the biggest pair of boots on so that he could draw the finish line, the starting line across the dirt road where it all got going. Very, very humble beginnings. But now, particularly for those of you that have run in Boston or are running, you know there's something special about everybody who's running there. It's a race that, for the most part, you can't get into. Most people, about 83% of the field, is comprised of qualified runners, people who have gone out and run another marathon and met a qualifying time for their age and gender to get in, which is really, really hard. If you do that, you're in about the top 12% of marathoners in the world in your age and gender category. If you do, you get to walk around with something that says you're a qualified runner. And you don't walk, you kind of strut. You know, think John Travolta. And you've earned it. You get a right to feel good about that. It is difficult. You put in a lot of work to get there. So the great majority of the field is made up of people who had to work really, really hard to get there. The rest is pretty much charity runners. And some of the people, oftentimes we don't have room for all the qualifiers who want to run. We have to cut some of them out because we're limited by the size of the streets, and the cities and towns want to get their cities and towns back. So can't fit everybody, and sometimes there's a little bit of resentment at charity runners because they didn't qualify. But at the same time, what have they done? They've signed up to go out and raise a whole lot of money for an immense number of really good causes, and by the way, still have to train. They raise, on average, about $10,000 a piece in doing that, and it brings in about $40 million. So that's a pretty special part of the field, even if it is the smallest part. If you go to London, London is largely a charity race. Most people are there to raise money, and it's a costume ball. They dress up in really funny ways. When a 12-person caterpillar goes by you, you think this is a little outside the normal range, but they may also have raised about 200,000 euros. So you say, Caterpillar, keep it up. You're looking good. See if you can make it a centipede, really raise a lot of money. So the charity people, very special. So as one running the Boston Marathon, you're part of a very, very special group. And when you get to Boston for the race, for those of you who have been there or just been there with somebody else, like Casey up in the back here with Nancy, just hanging around. It's kind of fun. Maybe get out there, get on the subway, and see 2 or 3 different places along the race course as your relative or whoever goes by. Today, it was my great privilege to speak to volunteers. Nobody is more important. Those are the ones that we have. If you're a Boston Marathon volunteer, what do you get? You get a jacket. You get a jacket. If you're in the right place, you get a sandwich, but you got to be in the right place, and it might not be very good. But they love it because they come out and they get to help other people. And there is something that I'll allude to a little bit further as well. There's a little bit of psychology, a little bit of brain chemistry that says if you help somebody else, you're going to feel good about yourself. And it kind of happens, and it's certainly true for them. And so when I talk about what you're going to feel at the marathon in Boston, you're going to feel all 9,500 of those people, starting the moment you get there and go to pick up your number and get your shirt, go to the expo, buy a little swag, whatever it is. But the volunteers start right there, and boy, do they do everything they can to make you feel welcome. And they have a great time doing it. They come back at an annual rate of about 94%. Not necessarily person by person, but group by group, because they so enjoy being involved with those of you who come to run, because you give them so much back. They just feel great about it when it's over. And they do things that I wouldn't recommend. For example, among people who really want to come be a Boston Marathon volunteer, the thing that they most request, they most want to do, is be at the finish line and put medals on runners. Now, you've run marathons. What did you look like, feel like, smell like when you got to the finish line? Would you have wanted to put a medal on you under those circumstances? Probably not, but they do. And with a big smile on their face and a big sense of congratulations. And their reward is a look on your face. And the exchange there, which is good for both sides, is part of the feeling that you get when you go run there. And it's part of what you give back. You make them feel good. Yeah, they're doing something for you, but you're doing something for them. It's a very nice sort of relationship. And then spectators. There are hundreds of thousands of them, about 500,000 we think. It's kind of hard to know. Some marathons will say we had 1 million spectators there, or 2 million. If you do the math, if you had 1 million spectators on 52 miles of sidewalk, right, both sides of the road, they have to be about like this, about 6 deep for 84 kilometers, right, both sides of the road. It's improbable. It's never happened. But there really are about 500,000 in Boston. And what are they out there to do? They're out there to cheer for you and make you feel good, because they enjoy doing it. And I will tell you, put your name on your shirt, because everyone will call it out as you come along and make it a personal kind of experience. And it's fun. If they say, hey, Charlie, hey, you're looking good, not bad. If they get a smile out of you, they enjoy it. It's fun. And that's why they keep coming back as families, year after year, generation after generation in the same place. And other spectators along the way. One of the favorite places for most of us to run is Wellesley College, one of America's great institutions of higher learning, perhaps the most highly thought of women's college. Deep thinkers, intellectual women, most of the time. Boston Marathon Day, Patriots Day in Boston, the third Monday, they come out there on both sides of the road and create what's called the scream tunnel. They make a lot of noise, and they scream for you. And if you're a male, it's your fastest mile of the whole race. You kind of feel good. Yeah. Well, they might give you a little bit of a hard time. I picked carefully the signs that are here, because the vast profusion of them are just magnificently profane. They're the signs people know about. There's no place more important for signs, of course, than here. Remembering all the people who lost their lives back in 1995. And so one can't say that there is a parallel there, because there isn't at all. But it's another way of expressing either joy or remembrance, but among all, solidarity between the people who are there to watch and the people who are there running. It comes out in different ways in different places for different reasons, but when I talk about what you're going to feel, you'll feel that. And it's fun. It's very nice indeed. And you know that you're halfway, which means you've got a really long way to go. And then you get into the hills, and I'll digress for just a second here. What's really hard about the Boston Marathon is the very downhill nature of it. Once you get through about 21 miles to the top of what's called Heartbreak Hill, which isn't that bad a hill, and getting up it is not that bad, but when you start to go down, you're going to be going down for much of the next 5 miles. And those quadriceps, the muscles in the front of your thigh, where you got little tears in that first mile, those tears get big and they start screaming at you. And if you haven't done a lot of downhill work, or a lot of work, almost sprint work to tighten, to strengthen your quads, you're going to pay a price for it. I know. I have. The first time I ran it, stupid as could be, it was 100 degrees, just as dumb as dirt to go out and run that day, but I did. It was my first chance to run Boston. I'd qualified. But I got to there and started going down, and it was awful. I ran by the building in which I was conceived and had no idea where I was. So watch out for yourself. Have fun when you do it, but take it easy. Have a somewhat measured pace as you go along so that you can enjoy what comes later. This is the last turn. People are coming up Hereford Street, which leads up to Boylston Street, which is where the finish is. Those 600 or 700 yards down the road. And look at the depth of spectators there. This is late in the race. 85, 90% of the people who have gone through. The spectators come out there more for ordinary citizens than they do for the people up front, the pros who win the race. There's nothing they can do for the pros. They got heads down, they're running to win. These people are trying to survive. They've run 25 and a half miles. 1 mile to go happens just as you kind of get near that corner. And they know that when they sound off, they're helping you. And if they give you just get you to look up a little bit, you're giving them back something as well. Everybody feels good about it. And at that point, you really are just about there. For those of you who have run, what's the worst thing you ever hear running in a race from people on the sidewalk? Yeah, you're almost there. And in your head you say, well, no, I'm not. No, that's not true. But there you are, and it can be kind of fun. So there's a lot of joy there that you can experience, but there can also be great challenge. Bad things can happen, and that's where we learned from all of you about the importance of being ready for what might ever come along. Just one more thing on that point. In 2018, yeah, lovely day to run. Cool breezes, gentle rain. It was about 34 degrees. It was pounding rain with a howling wind off the ocean coming in the runner's face every step of the way. One person described it as like running into a frozen car wash, which was about right. Almost all the top runners dropped out. If we have time, I'll talk about what happened to a couple who did not. It was awful, except ordinary runners, not there to win the race, put on their trash bags and banded together and ran in packs to help each other, because they knew if they worked with others, they could do it. That same sense of sharing, of helping others, which in turn helps you to feel a little bit better. There'd be these enormous packs that would come along, and suddenly the already powerful wind would pick up another gust. And what you'd hear from these crowds was, bring it! And they kept going and pushing through it. 98% of the people who ran that day finished the race. Of the people who were there as pro runners, I don't know, 12%, something like that. They were going to go compete another day. But for people for whom the Boston Marathon is a big deal, they stuck together. And the spectators stayed out there with them to keep them going. Again, people sharing, helping others, feeling good about themselves for doing it in a shared enterprise. It was quite a day. So we want you to be careful when you start. Take it easy, so you can enjoy that finish when you get there. But once upon a time, Bill Ifrig. Well, we missed the sound of the explosions. The sound didn't quite come up, but that's okay. Who needs to hear that? So there's what it looked like from the finish line. A day of great horror. Again, nothing compared to what happened here. But for us who were there, an awful event. And for people like Carrie, you look at something like that and you say, wow, boy, what was that day like? Here it was a perfect day to run and to watch. Those are pretty rare. And suddenly, two huge explosions happen. You can see all the smoke, the confusion that was going through there, people running in all directions. And you might ask yourself, as a leader of an event like that, that just happened. You're in charge. What do you do? And in your mind is the fact that, apart from everything else, sometime your mind goes to the fact that this is a day by which your organization will be judged more than by any other. And it's a day that will follow you around as that leader for the rest of your life. You're in charge. What do you do? And as Carrie knows, and many of you know from other kinds of experience, at that moment you're not going to do much at all, because it's going to play out in a great many personal interactions out there that you're not going to be there for. Somebody else is going to have to do it. So the question then is, what have you done to prepare? And for us, that was very important, and we were guided in that by what happened here. We spent a long time focusing on exactly how we would deal with that situation, because we knew what had happened here, and we knew it could happen elsewhere. When the Chinese write the word crisis, they use two individual characters. One stands for danger, one stands for opportunity. When you have that much danger and horror, how can you possibly turn it into opportunity? But you have to plan for it that way. And that's what we had done. It was my great privilege to take over leadership of the Boston Athletic Association in 2011. Before that, I had been an uninteresting corporate business lawyer putting deals together all over the place. But I'd been involved with the BAA for quite a long time. And in the first 2 years that I was doing that, we ramped up considerably our planning for what would happen if there was a catastrophe, a mass casualty event at the Boston Marathon. So there would be, this is just a picture of one meeting, in a way akin to the one we had here earlier today when all the volunteer groups checked in with one another. How you doing? Are you ready? What do you need? How can I help? In Boston, we call it the organizing committee. I felt like I had gone home. It was very, very similar. This is at the Massachusetts Emergency Management Agency, MEMA, akin to FEMA for the federal government, where there would be a coordination among all of us at the BAA, but more importantly, all the 8 cities and towns, all their police, fire, emergency medical people, all manner of state agencies that would be involved, federal agencies. There would be one person appointed as the federal coordinator that would take care, would be the point of contact for the ones that you would expect: Homeland Security, the FBI, CIA, FEMA, the Federal Aviation Administration, which would have to fly over and make sure the air lanes were clear, would do really scary helicopter checks right through about this high off the ground in Boston to check for radiation. All of that had to be planned out in advance, and working with the hospitals. There are 6 level 1 trauma center major hospitals within 2 miles of the Boston Marathon finish. So there were exercises that brought everybody together, planning for exactly this kind of thing, including 2 24-hour sort of live fire exercises funded by the federal government under the Urban Shield program, where we did rehearsals for a bombing, for terrorists with guns or some other kind of weapons, or a fire, a gas explosion near the finish line, whatever would happen, so that they had protocols for all of that in case it happened. And then it did. That's the operations center that we have near the finish line. The Boston Marathon, as some of you may know, finishes right by the Boston Public Library, this ancient, beautiful structure of Beaux-Arts library. That room there normally looks, as I was saying to the group earlier today, more like it should be in Downton Abbey than in a disaster film. But every organization is there. Everybody can be in touch in one place, just as they are out at the Mass Emergency Management Agency. So everything can be coordinated. Communication can be done rapidly. Like you, we have ham radio people who are there as well, because when everything else doesn't work, ham radios work. You know? What do you use ham radios for anymore? Well, to save lives. So that it's kind of an impressive place. So now it happens. These bombs go off. What do you do? everybody knew what to do who was involved in the planning process, and like that, it went into action. 84% of the field had finished. So we only had about 6,000 people left on the course. Pretty day, party day at the Boston Marathon finish line. Everybody's having fun. That explosion takes place. The response was instant. There were 6 ambulances staged at medical tent A, the big medical tent that you would have seen when you finish the race and it's off to your right. There's a medical tent B not far away to pick up the people who don't fall down until 10 minutes later, which happens a lot. Those 6 ambulances became 74 in a heartbeat. The 30 most seriously injured people with traumatic amputations, sometimes a double traumatic amputation, were in an operating room within 18 minutes. All the seriously injured people were in the hospital within 47 minutes because everybody had planned for it, and had planned for it to the deepest level of detail, so that when an injured person, a profoundly injured person, went into that medical tent, there was someone to triage right away. Red, green, blue. Or red, yellow, green. What's their state of need? Get them back to the right place. Now identify the need, what kind of treatment is necessary. There were 3 people there who did that work, who would understand what was needed for that person. What hospital was available, could do that work, had the best people for that, and also had not already been overloaded. So they could distribute the load, and that's why all those people were so rapidly brought to where care was needed. But all of that arising out of a need to take care of runners, take care of everybody. And it was that planning that made such a difference. You saw the room at MEMA a moment ago. There was a gentleman there pictured with a MEMA jacket on. The chief of Boston EMS, there was an EMS jacket. The head of Boston EMS, friend of Nancy's and mine, still does it, Jimmy Hooley. I wrote about this once in an article. Grabbed Jimmy and he said, yeah, you know, planning, rehearsing, doing all that stuff gets kind of boring, repetitive, until the real world happens. And the real world happened that day, and the work that Jimmy Hooley did to be at the center of all of that, coordinating all of it, because it all came down to one place in the first instance to get these people to the right places, just made an enormous difference. But it went beyond planning, because there's something else that has to happen. Those bombs went off outside the crowd control barriers on the sidewalk. And so emergency management, emergency medical people going out to get them couldn't get there right away because they had to break down fences. It doesn't take a long time to do that, but in those situations, a few minutes makes an enormous difference. So what happened? Amidst all that chaos with bombs going off and the police saying, get out of here, there could be more. Go, now, you, out. People did something different. They did what people did here in 1995. They ran toward the explosion. Why would you do that? You know, why does anybody do that? In part, I mean, certainly they wanted to help others, but it also helped them feel fulfilled. They knew they had to do something. It was in them. And it's also the job of leaders like Carrie and me, not just to help drive the planning process, but far beyond that, to engage everybody else who lives around there. All the people in the cities and towns, people who are spectators, people who live there, do all you can so that they feel like it's their event. I did a little TED Talk once called In Boston, Everyone Owns the Marathon. And that was really, I thought, for me, among the most important jobs. I spent more time at that than any other single area of activity, being out all the time, just helping people, not causing them to feel good about the race, because they did, but helping them to do it even more, so that they would have that sense of ownership. So what you see here is a young man, Rob Wheeler. Rob was a guy who didn't really have a home. He grew up in foster homes, but was grateful for all the help he had gotten from the state. He hears the bombs go off. He thinks, I got to go back and help. I don't care, I'm supposed to leave. Everyone's telling me to go. And he goes back without any real training. He didn't know what to do. And this guy on the ground is bleeding seriously. So Rob lifts his leg up, trying to just keep the blood from flowing up there. But now he's kind of out of things to do. Gentleman in the hat, an Army colonel, now in the faculty at West Point, a decorated battlefield veteran, Bronze Star recipient in combat in the Middle East. He had just guided a blind runner across the finish line. He and a Navy guy, a SEAL, were doing it together. He told the SEAL, take this guy out of here. I've got to do what soldiers do. And he went back and got a tourniquet on there. And they saved Ron Broussard's life, who was lying on the ground. If they hadn't been there, he'd have been dead. A couple of runners who went back because it was their race and they felt part of it and they had to do something to help. Fairly famous picture, the guy in the cowboy hat, Carlos Arredondo, a guy whose son died in battle in the Marine Corps several years before. His other son, his only other child, committed suicide afterwards after the loss of his brother, couldn't cope with it. Carlos was there that day and the explosions happened and people took off as they quite properly should have, but he didn't. He thought, I got to do something. And he went out there to get to Jeff Bauman, whose legs had been blown off, both of them, to get Jeff just slightly stabilized until somebody could come, a white-jacketed marathon volunteer and somebody from EMS who came out and they got Jeff into the medical tent. And Jeff survives to this day and lives a very full life. But if not for people like that, what happens? Jimmy Plourde, a firefighter in Boston, but a long-time medic, EMS guy, and then he transferred to the fire department. He's way far away, just doing crowd control or something. Bombs go off. He turns into a volunteer and sprints back, picks up Victoria McGrath right next to where those other two gentlemen performed so heroically, gets her stabilized, and just there's nobody to come get her. He just carries her in. And she survives. Without that, she wouldn't have. Tragically, in the most bitter irony, she died in an automobile accident 2 years later in the Middle East. Just an awful thing. But for all those people, they care about what happened to runners who were there. That's the feeling. Those are the people that you're around when you're there. Now, for us as leaders, how do you engage all these people? What is it you have to do? I looked for leadership guidance to something my father had told me long before. My father was in the Patton Army in the Second World War in an armored division in Europe. And what he would tell me is that Patton said, if you want somebody to do something, don't tell them how to do it. Tell them what you need and let them amaze you with their ingenuity. And we pretty much put that to work in dealing with people in Boston. There were some people we had control over, and we could tell them, here's how you're going to do things. But there are a whole lot of other people you have no control over, but you need them to be engaged so that if you need them for heaven knows what, and nobody could guess, they're going to be there. And it certainly happened. We have a series of written protocols for decision making under stress, which sounds sort of dry and a little bit anal. But it really boiled down to very, very few things for people, because we knew that if something happened, none of us who were leaders were going to be there to deal with it. And so we would tell people, volunteers, everybody, whatever happens, don't be limited by what other people tell you to do. You figure it out. Do three things. Figure out to whom do you have the greatest obligation in this moment. You'll decide that. Focus on the things you can control, and don't get too distracted by the things that you can. And then do whatever you think is right, because we trust you. The most important thing down at the bottom. I'm not going to be able to do anything. Nobody in the leadership structure will do anything, and you may just be somebody who is walking down the street or who lives upstairs when that happens. But we want everybody to sort of know that whatever you do, boy, that's good with us, because you're the ones that are there in the moment, and you're going to do the right thing. And they did. One of my favorite examples, just a little one, is bananas. One year, really, really cold, runners come in to get their bananas beyond the finish line. But it's so cold that runners can't peel the bananas. So what do the volunteers do? They start peeling the bananas. That was not on page 611 of a manual someplace or other. Nobody came around and said, hey, peel the bananas. They just did it. People just did things. When all those 6,000 or so, 5,600 people got stopped, they couldn't finish the race because it was a crime scene. Couldn't go in there. They would go around to get their personal belongings, and they could get that, but what did they really want? What do people want at the end of one of those races? What do you want to go away with? A medal, right? And they thought, I didn't finish. I can't get my medal. So a volunteer, a guy, just a guy, John Studley, was there where all this was happening, and the medals, we'd been able to, the FBI was nice enough to help us get the medals out of the crime scene so that they could be distributed. And Studley had the medals there, and he knew there was, in our office, there was a little mock finish line, a perfect replica, color and all, of the finish line about that big. He took it, put it down on the ground, and people come in and say, I couldn't get my medal, and he would say, well, yeah, here, step over. And they would, and he would put the medal on them. And you can imagine the range of reaction that engendered, from tears to exultation to some combination of all of that. Nobody told him to do that. He was one of those people who just dealt with the situation as he saw it, did what he could do to make others feel better, and went about his way. And that's what we trusted them to do, and as I have gone through the museum, Nancy and I here, we have seen that that is precisely what happened on a massive scale here in 1995. People who take pride in who they are and where they are, and who know they're trusted to do things that one could never begin to predict. And for us, it had a lot to do with people just wanting to help others. And that spirit of helping others came to be known by the slogan, Boston Strong. It was kind of a slogan. It became a bit of a symbol for people going in to help others. And in doing so, feeling better about themselves as they had done it. And there was one person who gave voice to it for us, and I'll apologize for just a little bit of language here. David Ortiz, Red Sox baseball player of some renown. On Saturday, following the bombing, was at Fenway Park. You can see volunteers out there, along with first responders, police, and everybody, an enormous American flag on the left field wall at Fenway Park. Somebody had to speak. It was Big Papi.
This is our fucking city. And nobody gonna dictate our freedom. Stay strong. Thank you.
I hope you could hear that. This is our freaking city. Nobody's going to dictate our freedom. Stay strong. And that's what happened, just as it did here. But it embodied an approach to trouble and resilience moving forward, quite akin to what I have come to understand is the Oklahoma standard here, which has a lot to do with service, with honor, with kindness. And those are things that happened on that day and continued to happen for a period of time. And all of that being things that we really built on from what you did here, you and the people who were here then, who had to live through the unimaginable horror of all of that. Now, we live in Boston. Boston is riddled with colleges and universities. They're everywhere. And when something happens, studies get done. They just can't stop themselves. They have to do it. So the Harvard Kennedy School did a very large-scale study, and brought a lot of us in to determine, why was Boston strong? What worked? There was the horrible tragedy of 3 people dying, but so many people surviving, way against the odds. There are a lot of reasons why that should not have happened. So what led to it? And they made a diagram out of it after lots of pages. And what they focused on were some of the stuff that I talked about: capabilities, structure, processes, training, joint exercises, everybody getting together for things like day-long live fire training exercises, so that everybody knew what to do when it was noisy and scary, and there were simulated very, very badly hurt people there. They got up to whatever was Boston Strong, which they defined as something having to do with protection and liberty and resilience, a word that plays for you. But in the middle of the whole thing, trust, relationships, networks, engaging people. Not just the ones you control, but the ones that you don't. And with trust right at the center and right at the top. And that if there has been an organizing or leadership principle for us, it has been developing trust. Trust within the organization, trust among people, trust from the public, displaying trust in others, that they will do the very best they can, and boy, that's good enough for us. And it will be magnificently good for others, as it was on that most awful of days. 4 days after the bombing, the FBI said, we think we got a line on the killers. We think we know what's going on. But it's going to be hard to get them because there's so many people around. So the governor of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts and the mayor of the city of Boston put out an edict. And they said, everybody today, this Friday, stay home. Don't go out, don't go anywhere. Now, Boston can be a fairly contentious place among the population, and in any circumstance I can imagine at any time before that, the reaction of much of the population would have been something like, read between the lines. But that day, everybody stayed home, like everybody, all day long, and they caught these scoundrels. In the nighttime, in an adjacent town, with a whole lot of police who showed up from everywhere. And when it was over, the police started going home. It's late. And what happened? People came back out to cheer for the police. In Boston, never saw that before. May never see it again. But that day, everybody was together, as everybody was together here in 1995. It is a link that both events, both cities share that you don't see in very many other places. And you can see how surprised the police officer is. Holy excrement, what's going on here? And the response was broad to help those who were injured. The day after the race, the mayor organized a fund. And I was getting calls from charities. Everybody was going to set up a fund. And in other cities, in New York after 9/11, there was a miasma of funds. It became a bureaucratic nightmare. It took forever to get money to people. And to his credit, the Mayor Menino of Boston said, whoop, stop, one fund. We're just going to have one fund. And it took on that name. $80 million poured in from around the world for those people and was distributed within a few months because people cared, just as there was so much that went on here in the wake of the bombing. That was kind of the response. Where we are, you had so many more of them here. Now, when something like this happens, people show up to ask questions. Anderson Cooper was one of them. He came from 60 Minutes. Somebody says, go talk to Anderson Cooper on 60 Minutes. Ew. It seemed like a great idea. You know, what do they have on me? What's going to happen here? But there was none of that. He could not have been a more courtly gentleman. I thought he was going to ask about what happened in the bombing. He didn't. He said, what's going to happen next time? Is Boston ready? And this is on global television, 60 Minutes. You got to be careful the way you express yourself. You're representing a whole city. So I said, well, we're ready. Everybody is prepared. We're strong. We're resilient, and there's nothing people here can't do. And my mind was, is Boston ready? Damn straight, Boston's ready. What's the matter with you? Blind? Again, not so different from here. You know, were you ready? And if you remained ready and continued to help people who needed help and celebrate those people who were lost and those people who were so profoundly affected? Answer, yeah. We learned from all of that and did. You helped to make us better. 3 days after the bombing, President Obama came to Boston. He wanted to meet with volunteers. He wanted to participate in a non-denominational service in the very large cathedral in Boston. But he also wanted to meet volunteers. So the cathedral was decked out and all the finest people were there. But if you were there, you couldn't go to there wasn't room for the volunteers in there. They had to be in the gymnasium of the adjacent Cathedral High School. And if you wanted to be with them, well, you had to be with them. You couldn't also be in the cathedral. So Nancy and I had to pick, who do we want to hang out with on that day? I mean, we went to the gym, right? With the people who made a difference. And the president came, the folks were arrayed in a very large semicircle throughout the gym with their yellow volunteer jackets or white medical volunteer jackets. At one point, the governor of Massachusetts came over and said, Tom, you know the president? No, not this one or any other. So at the end of the line, the president was brought over. Nancy was up and back kind of taking pictures. But one picture was taken by the White House photographer. And one begins to see why some people are paid money to do that, because he captured all of the emotion in my face. The president spoke very kindly to me. I couldn't tell you exactly the words. It was beyond me to really listen. But I know exactly what I said to him, which was, Mr. President, it is the privilege of a lifetime to lead this organization. The people you just met with the yellow and white jackets, we had to issue new ones to most of them this morning because the ones that they wore on Monday are too bloody. As a leader, as a citizen of a city, in the midst of that kind of outpouring, you couldn't be prouder. Just as everybody here and all the people who were around in 1995 have every right to be as proud as they possibly could be for showing the way in a response to tragedy. People remember it. They come here to this magnificent institution here. Nancy and I got a chance to go around yesterday. Immensely moving. To sit and watch the video that goes on for 15 or 20 minutes, whatever it is, with so much of the detail displayed above a children's wagon that came out of the second floor on that day. The emotion is overpowering. So for us to have a chance to have something to do with everything here is terrific. For those of you who are running, all of the stuff I'm talking about, so much of which is derivative from what happened here and what was displayed here, that's going to be there for you. People are there to help you have a good time. They want to make sure it's fun for you. And in doing that, they have a good time. So pay attention. It's not going to be your fastest marathon. It's not going to be anyway, so forget all that. Run the race. Enjoy it. Enjoy all of it, the whole spectacle of knowing you're smart enough not to kill yourself on the first downhill, and running through all those women at Wellesley and all the people in Newton, Massachusetts out along the 4 hills leading to Heartbreak Hill, and then knowing you've had the good sense to be smart and go down that hill from Boston College so that you don't hurt yourself and you can savor the finish. Do all those things, and we hope you'll have a pretty darn good time. The connection between Oklahoma City and Boston, between the Oklahoma City Marathon, the Run to Remember, and the Boston Marathon, powerful, tangible. There are a lot of great marathons in the world. I was at the founding of what is now called World Marathon Majors. Some of you know about that, the 6 largest kind of elite mass participation races in the world, and they are phenomenal. If you can get to go to any of them, go do it. But when it comes to emotional connection between people who are there and the runners who are there, there's this place, maybe the Marine Corps Marathon, where there is such a connection, it is such a people's race, in Boston. For me, those are the 3 in the United States. If you want to experience something profound as a runner, not as an athlete, as a runner with a sense of history, well, those are the ones to go do. We're awfully glad for those of you who have come to do ours, and we hope that those of you who will go do it for the first time will have as good a time as so many others have. Now, I don't have a lot to add. That's the whole prepared part. Probably went longer than it should have. Let's have a conversation. What can I tell you that's of interest to you? Couple of questions. All right, by golly, we're not going to start slowly here. Yeah. That's from one of the TV stations in Boston.
I thought it was so interesting
Because
because he was running towards the bombing. He was running towards the bombing and not away. So that really.
Well, he was just.
Oh,
the videographer, as it were, was just down in the street instead of up on the photo bridge.
That was very impressive to me, that he was running towards the event and not away from it. The other thing I had a question about is your route from the initial 1896 when it first started, was that the route that the marathon took at that time?
It is largely unchanged. It started in those days to get to the. Could I have a chair here, just because I got a bum back, and at some point it'd be nice to sit down, and you won't have to look at me as much, which is not so bad. Thank you. And it was only 25 miles, so somebody who's
Okay.
telling us it wasn't good enough. What happened? The original marathon in the Olympic Games in Athens went from the plains of Marathon, where the Battle of Marathon took place in 490 BC, where the Athenians drove back the invading Persians and against all odds won the race. And there was a battlefield messenger who was tasked to go run and bring the news. He had done 2 other 25 or 30 mile messenger runs before, and now they say, hey, Philippides, go run to Athens and let them know what happened. By the way, Nancy and I have been there. If you go from from Marathon to Athens, it's kind of like that. You're going uphill almost all the way. And legend has it, and this is a legend that is defining for Greek people. It's a huge, big deal. Legend has it that Philippides got up there to the Acropolis, said, "Rejoice, we conquer," and fell down dead.
Yeah.
And so that was the route of the initial marathon in Athens. And so in Boston, they recreated it. It was about 25 miles long. The current distance, the standard distance for the marathon, 42.195 kilometers, 26 miles, 385 yards, was changed, I think, in the 1924 Olympics in London, when the king and queen wanted to see the finish. And it was a mile away. So it got moved so that for the convenience of royalty, and that became and remains the standard distance. So in Boston, the initial start was where if you're starting a marathon in Boston in 1896 and you want to have it start someplace else, how are you going to get people out there? You can't call an Uber. So you got to go out on the train line and take the train about 25 miles. You're in Ashland, Massachusetts. Okay, get off the train. We're going to go from here. And that's what it was when it was lengthened. Just keep going another mile and a half or so up Route 135, and you come to Hopkinton, Massachusetts, which is why the start is there.
And has there ever been consideration of changing the route at any point, or you just kept it because history or?
It is very much the latter. People
Okay.
would talk about it from time to time. It is administratively, logistically, it's wretched. You got to get everything, all those miles out there. You got to get the runners out there. You got to get supplies out there. If you have bad weather, there's not a really good place for them at the start to wait. We try to get them out there. We kick them out in 4 waves, so you're not sitting in the rain forever, but it's not good. And you get to the finish and there's no shelter. As opposed to, anybody here run the Houston Marathon? Yeah, I mean, it's great, right? You go sit in the parking garage if you want, if the weather's bad, until it starts. You go run a loop and you're right back in the same place. And you can go back into the parking garage if the weather is awful. It's a very sensible arrangement. And so from time to time people say, yeah, maybe we ought to do something smarter, but it's Boston. Yeah. It's ancient.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for asking.
Any other questions?
Don't make me ask you, well, because I will. All right, so for some of you who've run before, what was most memorable for you? Sir.
I got lucky and got to run it when it was still just a mass start before the waves. And we started by bib number, and your bib number was assigned by your speed. So the person with the bib number just in front of you and just behind you was the same speed you were. And so these 35,000 people are very crammed together, and you don't pass anybody. Like in Oklahoma City, the elites are gone, the slow people are back, and it kind of spreads out pretty quick. But in Boston, you are nuts to butts for as long as you can think of, as wide as the street is, because everybody around you is the same speed you are. You're not faster than them, they're not faster than you, and you stay together until you make that final turn where it goes from 2 lanes into 6 lanes in Boston before you don't have somebody all 4 dimensions of you. It's phenomenal.
What year was that? 05. Year you ran, 2005?
I'm sorry? 05.
Yeah. For those of you who are unaccustomed to carrying cashews in the race, people are really close together. Is what that was all about. Yeah, and the roads are really narrow. One of the problems about keeping the same roads is that the roads are not different from what they were in 1897. They're paved, but it's 2 lanes wide. So you've got to deal with all of those people coming down, and if anything gets in the way, how do you divert? For the first few miles, there's almost no place to divert people, to send them around someplace else. One year we got an urgent call from the town of Ashland, now the second town, about 3.5 miles down the road, saying that a horse had come by and deposited an enormous amount of what horses leave behind. And so, okay, therefore what? Was it a pony? Was it a Budweiser? What kind of horse was it? And it turned out to be nothing, but it does 2 things. One, it tells you that without very much work, almost anything can be a big problem. And the other is, as Gary and those of you here who work on it know, the most important thing you need when people say something has gone wrong is credible information. Are you listening to hysteria, or are you listening to the analytical observation of a person you can trust? And frequently it's more on the hysterical side, and you've got to calm them down and get somebody else. Anybody else? Yes, sir. Ooh, I recognize that jacket.
I think your duct tape story kind of resonated because in Oklahoma City, the leader of the Land Runners, Jack Rector, I think told a story once where he had duct tape on his shirt. And I kind of remembered that. And then when I was there in 2014, there were people that had green duct tape, and I asked them what they were doing, and I forgot about that. So I had my name here, and it said Oklahoma City. And I don't think I've ever gotten that many shout outs along the route. People were saying, "Go Thunder, Oklahoma City." I think that's the only point-to-point marathon I've ever done. So I probably got 100,000 high fives as I went to the side. So it was a pretty emotional, pretty uplifting experience.
And they're there for you. The race here was organized to remember what had happened 5 years before, 6 years before. In Boston, it had been around for a long time, but one of the greatest stresses ever, one of the hardest challenges was we have this horror that takes place in 2013. What do you do in 2014? And we had to find the right balance between looking back and remembering and honoring those who were so severely affected, and at the same time trying to move forward, still very close to what happened. And it worked out, but I can't remember a time that had more pressure, because everybody there, every elected official, everybody of any consequence whatsoever, knew exactly what had to happen. But no 2 of them thought the same thing. And so how do you weave through that? Now, Carrie had been there, she'd have figured it out, but I had a very hard time with it, and we finally got there. Different jacket, different year.
Yeah, speaking of different jackets and different years, I got to 2013 here. I was at Boston, and I remember 2012, the heat. I ran that one. I got a streak going, so I've been to all the Bostons. I've been last year through, whatever it's. But anyway, 2012, the heat was so bad. We were so ready for that Boston that 2013 brought, because we trained so hard. You get to the start line, and it was a beautiful day.
Yeah.
It was ideal, and we took off, and I trained. Everything came together training-wise that year, and I had my fastest time, and I completed the marathon, and my buddy Mike completed. We were about an hour before the bomb.
Yeah.
Maybe not quite that long, but we really had a good time. We had got back to the hotel, and we just got up there, and that bomb went off, and it was just, we were going, did they shoot the cannon off? Because we could look right down from our hotel at the Marriott Copley and see the finish line, or see the bombing site. I actually got pictures of it, and it's just, it was devastating, and I was here at Oklahoma City when the bomb hit here too, so
Yeah.
I hit 2 of the main bombing sites. Well, here's this Mike's wife is a doctor, and he's a doctor, and she was doing her medical training here at Oklahoma City, and she did a triage when the bombing went off here. So it's just, that was amazing. And then she did her residency in New York City. She was at 9/11, ER doctor. And then out of the blue, Mike reached his 25th consecutive Boston in 2013. She never comes, but that's his, he got into the Quarter Century Club.
Yeah.
She showed up there. She's at 3 bombings. It's just,
Yeah.
and, yeah.
There's some ironies that are hard to deal with. I was there for every bad thing that ever happened at the Boston Marathon. I think 2012 is a good example. In 2012, it was 88 degrees and some humidity, very, very close to the time when you would just have to call it off. And we had 3 very difficult days trying to determine whether we would call it off or not. And one of the problems is you get people from around the world who are there to run, and some are going to run no matter what. So what do you do? And so we ramped up preparations to a very, very high degree. In a way, we got to, somebody once described it to me as rehearsing our trust. We rehearsed emergency stuff a lot that year, which helped to make us more ready the following year. If the same thing happened and I was in charge today, I'd probably call it off. It was so risky. I had to gather together all the political leaders, public safety agencies, everybody into one room on Sunday, the day before the Monday marathon, and say, we got to make a decision. And with the head of the MEMA group that I pictured up there, we agreed I would make the call, but he could change it if that was what the public interest demanded. And finally, I talked and talked and talked. I thought we could do it. And I finally went around the room and said, I'm going to go to every person in this room. And if any of you says no, it's off. Now that's a pretty cheesy trick, right? Who's going to say no in the face of all that? But at the same time, everyone's voice had to be heard. They had to have an opportunity. We decided to do it. A couple of days before, I had told people, if you're sick, if you're hurt, if you can't handle heat, you can defer. You can come back next year. We had never done that before. But that took, I don't know, 2,400 people out of it. And in the end, nobody died. One guy came pretty close. But it was a very scary day, but it was a way to rehearse the effectiveness of a lot of what I was talking about. So, Carrie, thank you. I've gone on too long.
Well,
here.
thank you, Tom, and let's.
Thank you.
Grateful to have you. I'm just going to give you a piece of the granite from the Murrah Building here, and it says Oklahoma City and Boston shared joy in the marathon, shared resilience in the face of tragedy. So, hope you'll remember us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you guys for being here. If you're not signed up, you got to get signed up. We are projecting a sellout, so don't wait till the last minute because there can't be any really last minute favors. So get signed up. If you're going to Boston, we're cheering for you. Lynn will be there at the finish line, and several others will be there cheering you on. So thank you guys, and we appreciate your support, and we look forward to seeing it at our finish line.
And